A wealthy woman tried to have a black man removed from his first-class seat, assuming he didn't belong, but when he pulled out his federal agent badge, the entire cabin froze. The story flipped in seconds, and the consequences hit harder than she ever expected. Carolyn Baker stepped into the first-class cabin of her Delta Airlines flight from Boston to Washington, D.C., her heels clicking confidently against the aircraft floor. She was no stranger to this kind of travel. First-class tickets, complimentary champagne, warm smiles from the flight attendants. For her, flying wasn't just transportation. It was a reminder of her status. At 58, Carolyn was a retired communications director who had worked with high-profile political campaigns. Sharp, composed, and used to being the smartest person in the room, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had always known exactly where she belonged. But that confidence wavered the moment she saw the man sitting in seat 1B, right next to hers. He was black, early to mid-30s, wearing a gray button-down shirt and a leather jacket. He had a small backpack under his seat, wireless Bluetooth earpiece in his ear, and a calm expression as he scrolled through his phone, seemingly checking a map. Carolyn frowned. Nothing was obviously wrong, yet her instincts, or perhaps her assumptions, started to speak louder. He doesn't look like someone who flies first class. No suit, no luggage. Maybe he sat in the wrong seat. The thought echoed in her mind again and again. She took her seat in 1A, trying to appear composed, but a quiet discomfort had already settled in. Something about him didn't sit right with her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. And then the question came, not spoken, not justified, just a whisper in her mind. Is he really supposed to be sitting here? That single thought, born out of nothing more than bias, would set off a chain of events more dramatic than anyone on that plane could have predicted. Carolyn fastened her seatbelt, but her eyes never left the man beside her, Marcus Reed. She didn't know his name yet, but in her mind, she had already filed him into a mental folder. Black male, early to mid-30s, sitting in first class looking out of place. No tailored suit, no designer luggage, just a small black backpack tucked neatly under his seat, and for her, that was a red flag. Marcus, however, didn't seem to notice, nor care. His Bluetooth earpiece was in, his eyes were on his phone, occasionally typing something into an app. Calm, focused, unbothered, completely unaware of the quiet storm brewing next to him. Carolyn crossed her arms and leaned back slightly, pretending to relax, but inside she was anything but calm. She glanced down at her boarding pass again. Seat 1A. His was clearly 1B, assigned, legitimate. Still, something about it didn't sit right with her. It wasn't what he did. It was that he was there. And worse, he wasn't reacting to her unease at all. She turned toward the aisle and casually pressed the call button. A soft ding rang out. Within seconds, a flight attendant named Melissa, probably in her 30s, approached with a warm professional smile. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Carolyn smiled politely, her voice low and refined. "I don't mean to cause a fuss, but I think there might be a mix-up. I'm not sure if this gentleman is in the correct seat." Melissa glanced briefly at Carolyn's ticket, then at Marcus, who hadn't even looked up. "Let me double-check the seat map." She pulled out a tablet, scanned the manifest, and smiled. "Everything looks correct, ma'am. His seat is 1B, just next to yours." Carolyn's expression barely changed, but her lips tightened. "Oh, I must have misunderstood." She gave a faint chuckle and turned back to her seat, visibly displeased. Melissa walked away and Carolyn sat stiffly. She had just been corrected. Politely, yes, but it still stung. She wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not in a space she considered her own, but Carolyn wasn't the type to back off after one setback. She knew how to perform when needed. She'd done it for decades in press briefings and political spin rooms. She pulled out her phone and made a pretend call, speaking just loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Yeah, I'm on my flight to DC. First class, of course, but it's odd. There's this guy next to me. Just seems off." She lowered her voice slightly on the last sentence, just enough to plant doubt. Marcus glanced at her for the first time since she boarded. No words, just a look. Then he turned back to his screen. That bothered her even more. He didn't apologize, didn't explain, didn't flinch. He acted like she didn't exist. Carolyn hit the call button again. Melissa returned, now a little more curious. "Yes, ma'am." This time, Carolyn got straight to the point. "I'd like to change seats." Melissa blinked. "Is there an issue with the seat itself?" Carolyn hesitated, then tilted her head slightly toward Marcus and dropped her voice. I just don't feel safe." That line, soft as it was, cut like a blade. It didn't need evidence. It didn't need reason. It was just a feeling. And in today's world, not feeling safe is often all it takes to trigger action. Melissa paused. The tension between them was sharp now. I understand, ma'am. Let me see if we have any other seats available. Carolyn nodded, feeling a slight sense of victory returning, control once again within reach. But what she didn't know was that the trap she thought she had set was already beginning to close in on her. The gentle tapping of Marcus's fingers on the tray table echoed rhythmically. He hadn't said a word, hadn't looked her way, hadn't reacted to anything Carolyn had done. It was as if he danced this dance before and chose silence as his shield, but somehow that calm only made her more unsettled. Melissa returned after checking the seating chart, her voice soft but firm. I'm sorry, ma'am. First class is at full capacity. There are 2 open seats in economy, if you'd like me to move you. Carolyn sat up straighter and gave a tight, practiced smile. Perfect. He can take one of them. The words dropped like a bomb. Not loud, not aggressive, but soaked in entitlement. A man 2 rows ahead turned slightly, clearly listening. Across the aisle, a younger woman tilted her phone ever so subtly and began recording. Melissa hesitated, clearly caught off guard. She looked straight at Carolyn, then back to Marcus. Just to clarify, ma'am, you'd like me to move this passenger to economy? Carolyn nodded, calm and certain. Yes, that would be best for everyone. Melissa tightened her grip on the tablet in her hand. When she spoke again, her voice was cooler, more controlled. That's not going to happen, ma'am. Mr. Reed has a valid first-class ticket and is in his assigned seat. I will not ask him to move. The air thickened instantly. A few people gasped under their breath. Carolyn's cheeks flushed. She was losing control of the tone, the perception, the room. But she wasn't done yet. She pressed the call button again for the 3rd time. Melissa approached, this time slower, and her expression had noticeably changed. Is there something else I can assist you with, ma'am? Carolyn lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. I need to speak to someone in charge, the pilot, or the head of the crew. This is serious. A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. Someone behind them chuckled under their breath. Here we go. Melissa stood her ground, voice calm but less patient now. The captain is preparing for takeoff and cannot be disturbed. I am the lead flight attendant, and I am handling this matter. Carolyn tilted her head, trying once more to redirect the narrative. I just don't feel safe. That sentence, simple as it was, changed everything. Melissa froze. Her eyes shifted to Marcus. He still hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, but now he slowly placed his hands on top of his closed laptop and turned toward Carolyn. For the first time, he looked her directly in the eye, and Carolyn's heart skipped. It wasn't fear she felt. It was something worse, the cold realization that she had just crossed a line she couldn't take back. The silence in the cabin was absolute. Even the hum of the engine seemed to fade into the background. Melissa inhaled slowly. Ma'am, are you saying you feel threatened? Carolyn gave a soft shrug, voice low and fragile. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'd feel more comfortable if someone else took that seat. Marcus clicked his laptop shut, slowly and deliberately. Then, in one smooth motion, he reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a black leather badge wallet. He opened it calmly, holding it up at eye level. The gold shield of the U.S. Marshals Service glinted under the cabin lights. A few gasps scattered across the cabin. Carolyn froze. Then Marcus spoke, his voice calm, measured, and impossibly steady. Ma'am, he said, tilting his head just slightly, would you like to file an official complaint? I can take your statement right now. The moment Marcus raised his U.S. Marshal's badge, it was like the air got sucked out of the cabin. The gold shield glinted under the overhead lights, official, commanding, unmistakable. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It hit harder than anything Carolyn could have said. She froze, her lips parted, as if she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Her hands went rigid on her lap, and her heart was pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Around them, the cabin stirred. A few passengers gasped quietly. Someone whispered, "Is he a federal agent?" "Oh, she's done." The young woman across the aisle, still filming, zoomed in on Carolyn's face. No longer the one calling the shots, but the one being silently judged, watched, and recorded for the world to see. Marcus didn't move. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply looked her dead in the eyes, steady, unshaken. It wasn't aggression. It was clarity. And in that stillness, Carolyn saw something she couldn't deny. A mirror held up to her worst instincts. "You said you didn't feel safe," Marcus repeated, voice calm, controlled. "That's a serious allegation on a federal flight. If you'd like to continue, I'm prepared to take your statement now." Every word landed like a strike to the chest. This wasn't about feelings anymore, not about discomfort or personal space. This was now about law, about truth, and about consequences. Melissa, the lead flight attendant, stood to the side. Her hands were folded calmly in front of her, but her gaze had sharpened, no longer smiling, no longer soft. She wasn't here to play along. She was here to uphold the rules, and she knew exactly who had crossed the line. Carolyn swallowed, trying to hold it together, but deep down she knew the game was over. "No," she croaked, voice barely audible. "I don't want to file a complaint." Marcus gave a slow, knowing nod, like he'd expected that. He calmly closed his badge wallet, tucked it back into his jacket, and reopened his laptop like nothing had happened. It was quiet, but everyone in the cabin felt the shift. A few people started clapping, softly, not mockingly, just enough to acknowledge what had just unfolded. The power dynamic had changed, the truth had landed, and Carolyn, she wasn't in control anymore. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper and offered a half smile. "Looks like justice still works." Then he raised the paper again, as if the story had ended. Carolyn lowered her gaze, hands gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her face burned, not just with embarrassment, but with the terrifying realization that for once she had no backup, no title, no spin, no way out. A few rows back, the TikTok video was already being uploaded. In less than 5 minutes, it would hit thousands of views. The caption was simple: "Woman tries to boot federal agent from first class. It doesn't end well." Carolyn could feel her phone vibrating inside her purse. Texts, notifications, calls. A digital storm was coming, and all she could do now was sit still and wait to be swept away. Marcus? He was already back at work, his eyes focused on the screen as if she'd never existed. And that, more than anything, was the true power shift. When the person who used to control the room becomes the one no one even looks at anymore. The plane hadn't even taken off, but for Carolyn, the sky was already crashing down. She sat frozen, back pressed into the seat, cheeks flushed red, eyes locked on the window. Around her, no one spoke. No one asked if she was okay. There were no sympathetic glances, only silence, heavy with judgment. The hum of laptop keys came from Marcus, calm and steady. He had gone right back to work as if nothing had happened. He didn't look at her, didn't react, and somehow that cold indifference made her feel even smaller. Then it began. Bzzz. Her phone buzzed in her purse. One message, then another, then a call. She pulled the phone out and saw a flood of notifications. Familiar names, old friends, colleagues, even her granddaughter, all sending variations of the same question. "Grandma, is that really you in the video? What's going on? I just saw you on TikTok." Before she could respond, her phone vibrated again, harder, faster. An unknown number was calling. A message popped up from a former coworker with a link. "You're trending. First class Karen." Her hands trembled. She opened TikTok. Right there on the For You page was the video, barely 30 seconds long, showing Carolyn saying, "I don't feel safe," followed by Marcus calmly flashing his badge. The cabin's soft gasps and scattered laughter were caught in full. The video was posted by a young woman across the aisle. The caption read, "Lady tries to kick a black man out of first class. Didn't know he was a federal agent. 112,000 views, 28,000 likes, over 7,000 comments, and climbing fast." Carolyn felt her face go hot. She scrolled down, heart sinking. She really thought she could get away with this. That badge reveal was chef's kiss. Karma served cold in public. Who is she? Expose her job. Expose everything. The name Karen, that viral shorthand for entitled racially biased white women, was now being pinned to her. And the worst part? She knew there was no undo button for this. Marcus kept typing, completely unbothered. And that made it worse. He wasn't fighting back. He didn't have to. The truth was already doing the work for him. She tried to calm herself. It's just one video. Social media forgets quickly. But deep down, she knew better. People like her didn't get forgiven when caught on camera. Bzzz. Another buzz, this time an email. From James Rollins, chairman of the nonprofit board she sat on. Subject, regarding the current situation. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what it meant. Step down or be removed. Outside the window, the plane began to taxi toward the runway. The captain's voice crackled overhead with pre-flight instructions. Inside, Carolyn was crumbling. She gripped the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. It was just a misunderstanding, she told herself. Just a moment of poor judgment. Then came the Twitter notification. Trending. First class Karen. Trending. U.S. Marshal trending. Accountability. 3 hashtags. one inescapable reality. She exhaled shakily, eyes shut tight, trying to block out the noise in her head, but the storm wasn't over, not even close. And when this plane landed in Washington, D.C., she wouldn't be Carolyn Baker, respected communications consultant. She would be a symbol of privilege, of prejudice, and of a downfall that millions were now cheering for. Carolyn nearly jumped out of her seat the moment the plane touched down at Reagan National Airport. She didn't wait for the flight attendants to open the door. No polite goodbyes, no complimentary beverage. She bolted down the jet bridge like she was trying to outrun herself, but she couldn't outrun the internet. As she entered the baggage claim area, she caught the sound of a news report echoing from a TV mounted above the crowd. A viral video circulating online shows a woman attempting to have a federal agent removed from his first-class seat. The incident took place on a flight from Boston to Washington, D.C. The man, now confirmed to be a U.S. Marshal, did not respond, aside from calmly showing his credentials. Carolyn froze. She looked up, and there she was, her own face, on screen. That unmistakable look of frustration, the badge reveal, the quiet gasps from the cabin. It was all there, playing for every traveler in the area to see. A few people turned and stared. A couple whispered. A teenage girl pulled out her phone, aimed it at Carolyn, snap, and immediately started typing. Carolyn heard the shutter click like the sound of a door slamming shut behind her. She kept walking, head down, trying to melt into the crowd, but her phone had other plans. Buzz. A missed call from James Rollins, chair of the nonprofit organization she'd served on for 8 years. A message. We'll need your resignation letter by 9 a.m. The board is preparing a public statement. She stopped walking, just stood there in the middle of the terminal, like a ghost in the flow of rushing travelers. Less than 12 hours ago, she had still been Carolyn Baker, the respected former communications director, the woman who once appeared on CNN to talk about crisis management in the age of social media, the keynote speaker at ethics conferences across the country. Now she was the crisis, and no one was offering her the chance to spin the story. Another email from the private school she had supported for years. Due to recent public attention, your name will be temporarily removed from our list of donors. A message from an old political contact. I think it's best we keep some distance for now. Hope you understand. A Facebook comment on one of her past posts. Stop preaching about morals. You can't even follow your own advice. Each notification felt like a stone dropped on a glass tower. Her image, her influence, her carefully curated reputation, all shattering piece by piece. She got into a taxi, gesturing to the driver to just go anywhere away from this. In the back seat, she didn't even look out the window anymore. Even her reflection in the glass made her stomach turn. She remembered something she once said in a live interview. Social media is a tool. If you're honest, it amplifies your message. If you're fake, it'll destroy you. She had just proven herself right, in the worst possible way. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Mrs. Baker? Yes? This is a reporter from the Washington Chronicle. We'd like to request an interview about today's experience and give you a chance to respond. One of our producers will follow up shortly. Carolyn didn't speak. Experience? This wasn't an experience. It was a free fall. No, she said softly, voice cracking. I have nothing to say. She ended the call, leaned her head against the window, eyes vacant. The sun was setting outside, but her career had ended long before it hit the horizon. There was one thing she had never considered. Not every downfall comes from a scandal. Sometimes it comes from a single glance, a careless sentence, and the one person you misjudged. Carolyn's Boston apartment was completely still. She sat alone in the armchair by the window, the soft glow of her phone casting pale light across her tired face. Her once perfectly styled bun had come undone. Her lipstick was slightly smudged at the corners. The designer blazer she'd worn now looked crumpled, like her mood, exhausted and unraveling. On the table, her laptop sat open with an email displayed. Official statement. Carolyn Baker resigns from board of directors. She had read it at least 5 times, and every time it felt like she was reading about someone else. A character in a headline. A stranger. Her phone screen was still lit. The video had crossed 2 million views. Comments were pouring in by the second. But now, Carolyn didn't feel angry. She didn't feel wronged. She just felt empty. And maybe, after 58 years in politics, media, and boardrooms, after decades of mastering the art of controlling the narrative, this was the first time she was truly listening. Not to defend, not to spin, just to understand that she was wrong, not because of a single sentence, not because she got caught on camera, but because she had believed that reputation would shield her from consequences, that the image she built was stronger than accountability. But today, she had pulled down the curtain herself. Outside her window, Boston was easing into twilight. The world kept moving. Cars rolled past. People kept living. No one paused for the fall of a name. Carolyn looked up at the sky and let out a soft breath. Sometimes the true cost isn't what you lose. It's realizing you were never as right as you thought you were.